Hi, everyone. This is the preview segment of Derby Watch. I'm Brad Free with David Aragona. David, we have a lot of Derby preps coming up ahead this week, and including allowance races, graded stakes races all over the map. 5 races we're going to discuss briefly.
Yeah, this first weekend in March always seems to settle a lot, and we've got these preps taking place all across the country. I think the one that most people are looking forward to, especially, is the Fountain of Youth at Gulfstream, because we've got some of the major players, some of the horses in our top 5 on Derby Watch participating there. So interested to see how that and the other preps all play out this weekend.
Well, let's talk about the Fountain of Youth, since that is the most important race that we're going to be discussing. Most important race this weekend, arguably, and a field of 9, including Dornoch making his first start as a 3-year-old, and Locked as well making his postponed comeback. And I guess the complexion of this race is going to depend largely on whether Speakeasy runs Saturday in the Fountain of Youth or Friday in a one-of-the-van allowance. And trainer Todd Pletcher is not going to make that call until Friday morning. But David, whoever wins this race is virtually in the Kentucky Derby with 50 points to the winner. 3 Derby Watch listers in this field, including Speakeasy. What are you looking for in general with regards to the comebacks of Dornoch and Locked?
With Dornoch, I think you're looking for him to just take that mental step forward, because he showed a lot of talent last year, this full brother to Mage, but he wasn't always the most professional horse in his races, often hanging on his left lead in the stretch, looking around, kind of pulling himself up in the lane a few times. So you just want to see this horse really run a professional race, potentially rating off those 2 speed horses that are coming out of that common maiden race to his inside. I think it's a great post position draw for Dornoch, being outside of those horses. So just want to see him run a professional race. And as for Locked, you want to see sort of that progression like we saw from Timberlake last week, where he was able to come back and show that he can still perform at the same level that we saw from him as a 2-year-old. I think we've seen some signs that the Breeders' Cup Juvenile was a solid race, and Locked arguably ran better than his result would indicate that day, because the pace really never materialized for him, and he closed well for 3rd. So just want to see him finish this race well.
Well, it's about time he makes his comeback. It's a little bit later than was originally scheduled. He was supposed to go in the Sam Davis a couple weeks ago. He missed it because of a fever. He's back. He's training well, reportedly, and goes into the Fountain of Youth. Speakeasy is the interesting candidate. We'll talk about him in just a minute. But the Fountain of Youth, a good, solid race. And back just quickly regarding Dornoch, his win in the Remsen, yeah, it's true. He had the bias in his favor, but it turns out that the Remsen was a very strong race. 2 of the horses that he beat subsequently won stakes races. 2 other horses he beat came back and finished 2nd in stakes races. So this wasn't your typical Remsen stakes that he won. He beat a good field that day.
Yeah, and even though he did ride a bias, I think you can't argue that. It was a very fast-paced race, and he was aggressively ridden early to set that fast pace, and everybody else who was involved in the finish closed from the back of the pack. He was the only pace player that was around at the end. We saw another horse who was involved in the pace that Dornoch beat 16 lengths, Domestic Product, come back and run a nice 2nd in the Holy Bull. So I think it is fair to upgrade his performance a little bit just based on him setting that fast pace.
No doubt about it. Dornoch will be forwardly placed in the Fountain of Youth. At least that's where he usually is. And a horse that's going to be forwardly placed wherever he runs is Speakeasy. He's entered in a one-other-than on Friday. It's race number 7 on Friday. Trained by Todd Pletcher. He's also entered in the Fountain of Youth. And this is a very interesting horse because, David, Speakeasy ran super fast in his only start.
He did. I mean, it felt like a very fast race. There were a lot of stories about horses making their debuts coming into that race. We've seen a couple of horses to run back. It still was a difficult speed figure to make because it was sort of a dirt race run in isolation in the first half of that Pegasus World Cup day card, where all of the other dirt races were at the end of the day. So there was a big gap between the use of the dirt courses on that afternoon. So I think you want to see some validation because the field was so lightly raced coming in. Some horses come back and repeat those numbers. We had a couple come back last week and that ran well out of the race, finishing in a photo in a 9 furlong race at Gulfstream, also a maiden event. But you want to see these horses that finished well in the race come back and repeat it. Speakeasy, it seems like they're going to try a 2-turn test this weekend, whether it's on Friday or Saturday. And you do want to see a horse prove that he's got the stamina to go this far because we already know he's pretty fast.
Yeah, he earned a 100 Beyer speed figure in his career debut. Interestingly, he went off at odds of 8-1. A Todd Pletcher potential star who kind of slipped through the cracks in the betting, and Speakeasy, he ran very well over Victory Avenue, who is entered in the Fountain of Youth as a maiden second-time starter. Another horse in the One Other Than on Friday is Conquest Warrior, and I've been looking forward to the next start by Conquest Warrior since early January. All he did was win a maiden race, and he got a lot of mileage out of that maiden race because David, Conquest Warrior was very impressive. He got wiped out at the break. He was in all kinds of trouble on the turn and into the lane. And when we watch the replay of this race, Conquest Warrior, he's in the blue silks. He's kind of bottled up. He's going to swing outside. You talk about a burst of acceleration. This was a very impressive win. What do you think?
Yeah, this horse had multiple excuses to lose this race, and he still got the job done. As you said, broke slowly, was last early in this large field. It's really hard to close from that far back at Gulfstream for any horse, especially an inexperienced one like Conquest Warrior, and then had this stop and start run around the far turn. And still, when he got into the clear, he finished the way that he did. He feels like a horse that's not going to have any problem stretching out to the two turns, but you do want to see him pass that next test. And in typical Shug McGahee fashion, he's passing the tougher race, the Fountain of Youth, to just try to get this horse to learn something in this M1X allowance race, and then potentially, if he does pass this test, move on to the Florida Derby.
He earned an 84 Beyer speed figure, Conquest Warrior did, but you got to take that figure with a grain of salt because, as David mentioned, he overcame a lot of trouble and enough trouble that would have defeated a lesser horse. This is a horse with lots of potential. He needs to run well on Friday, and if he does, I imagine the McGahee will give him a shot. Probably in the Florida Derby, I would imagine. He's based down in Florida, and we'll find out how good Conquest Warrior is. And then again, this race, a lot of it's going to depend on whether Speakeasy runs on Friday or Saturday. If Speakeasy runs on Friday, he probably is going to be long gone, but we'll find out more as the weekend proceeds. Another big race on Saturday at Aqueduct, it's the Gotham Mile, and this race was shortened to 1 mile in 2018. It's not a race that has produced any serious Kentucky Derby players. In fact, since they shortened it up, no top 3 finisher from the Kentucky Derby is a horse who ran in the Gotham Mile. Maybe this year will be different because there is at least one exciting prospect who I think he wants even farther than a mile. David, I'm referring to Just a Touch.
Yeah, he's one of a couple of horses that Brad Cox is considering for this Gotham, and it definitely feels like he's the most high profile of those. I was impressed with his debut victory at Fairgrounds. It came over a wet track, but you had to like the speed that he showed and the way that he was able to stay on through the wire, and he's got the damn side pedigree to suggest that more ground is going to suit him, and he physically looks like that type, powerful moving son of Justify that's going to like to go longer.
Yeah, this is an exciting horse, and I hope he runs well. I'd like to see him move forward and join the Derby trail. David, you and I are recording this race before entries are drawn for the Gotham, but a couple other horses that we expect to see in the entry box includes a California shipper named Slider, and I guess I'm looking forward to watching Slider, stay around one turn. He finished 3rd in the San Vicente, and his performance on Saturday in the Gotham, I'm referring to Slider, I think will kind of validate Muth, who was an impressive winner of the San Vicente, and he's ineligible to the Kentucky Derby due to Churchill Downs' ban of trainer Bob Baffert. But Slider, he's kind of an interesting horse, stretching out from 7 furlongs to a mile.
Yeah, the Gotham has turned into a really interesting race, even if it doesn't always have implications on the Kentucky Derby. It's sort of that conversion of the sprinters stretching out and some of the horses who have gone longer cutting back. And you get this interesting large field going a 1-turn mile, or at least we expect it's going to draw a large field. And Slider, I'm interested to see how much speed is in the race because that's going to affect his chances. Linda Rice has El Grande O, who's cutting back after running 2nd in the Withers. He was a very good New York bred last year. Brad Cox also has Bergen, who just won the Jimmy Winkfield, and he's going to be stretching out a little bit. Not sure he's a Derby type, but one that has shown ability around 1 turn. And also, Christophe Clement is considering a couple of horses, including Deterministic, who was a very impressive debut winner at Saratoga last summer, had a setback, haven't seen him since, but a lot of intrigue in this Gotham field.
No doubt about it. We expect to see a big field, and whoever wins this race gets 50 Derby qualifying points and is virtually assured a berth in the Derby if they want it. So the Gotham is on Saturday at Aqueduct. David, you're going to be taking an in-depth look at the race in a video that should be available sometime on Thursday, obviously after the draw, correct?
That's right. This race, the Fountain of Youth, as well as the San Felipe, I'll be doing a Timeform US previews of all 3 of those.
Well, the San Felipe is on Saturday at Santa Anita, and just a heads up, the weather forecast is grim. It's a big day on Saturday at Santa Anita. 4 graded stakes, the grade 1 Santa Anita Handicap, the grade 2 San Felipe for 3-year-olds. the weather forecasters are predicting a wet track. It's going to be raining all day. At least that's the prediction as of Saturday. Under normal circumstances, this would be a very interesting Kentucky Derby relevant type prep race. In fact, a lot of good horses have come through the San Felipe. Authentic and California Chrome won the race. They both won the Kentucky Derby. Recent runners-up in the San Felipe include Medina Spirit, Giacomo, Real Quiet, Silver Charm. They all won the Kentucky Derby. Probably not going to happen this year because Bob Baffert has 8 of the 15 San Felipe nominees, and Baffert is ineligible for the Kentucky Derby this year. So at this stage, I don't really know that there's a whole lot of relevance. Scatify and McVeigh finished third and fourth behind Nisos last time out. And I guess I'm curious to see how well they run in the San Felipe to validate Nisos, as if Nisos needs any validation. An early read, David, on the San Felipe.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say about the race at this point. I was going to talk about the same 2 horses, Scatify and McVeigh, because it's going to be interesting to see if they can validate that speed figure that Nisos earned, because it was a jump up for a few horses in that race, not just Nisos. So you want to see them come back and repeat the same kind of number. I'm not sure how far either one of them wants to go. Maybe I'm a little more skeptical of Scatify stretching out in distance, but they've run fast speed figures up until this point. So we'll see how they stack up against whoever Bob Baffert decides to run in this race.
Yeah, well, with more than half the nominees, I'm sure he'll have a strong hand. That's on Saturday at Santa Anita, the San Felipe, likely to be run on a wet track. The Battaglia Memorial will be run Saturday at Turfway Park. I don't know. This race probably is not all that relevant from a betting perspective. You have to love a 14-horse field with a lot of ways to go. Interestingly, that the horse with the highest last start speed figure in the field, Bolt at Midnight, is not even nominated to the Triple Crown, which I thought was a little unusual. Owned and bred by Mick Ruiz, son of Bolt Doro, but he did not make him eligible to the Triple Crown. Epic Ride has been impressive in his last 2 starts. David, I kind of doubt that the Battaglia Memorial, it's a prep for the Jeff Ruby, but it just doesn't strike me as a Kentucky Derby relevant race, at least going in.
I would agree with that. We see that pretty often play out where the Jeff Ruby attracts a lot of shippers from all around the country trying to achieve those Derby points that are on the line there. And we don't often see too many horses coming out of the John Battaglia have a lot of success in the Jeff Ruby, but this did draw a very competitive field. It's going to be a tough race to handicap, a great race for bettors. Epic Ride definitely has looked good coming into the race. I'm a little interested to see if a horse like the number 14 Khabib can draw in, because he had a really tough trip last time, but seems like a tall order, especially if there are a couple scratches from an outside post position. So not anticipating this race is going to have a big impact on Derby Watch next week.
Well, if it does, we'll talk about it next week for sure. Let's finish up the review segment with take a quick look at On the Bubble. By the way, Just a Touch last week was an On the Bubble horse. We elevated him to the Derby Watch top 20. David, the top 2 on the Bubble this week are New York-based. Tell us a little bit about Panda Gate and Uncle Heavy.
Yeah, I wanted to stick Panda Gate on the Bubble this week because he feels like a horse that could make a late entry into the Kentucky Derby conversation. Still not confirmed that the connections are going to target a 100-point prep race in early April, but they're leaving all the options on the table for this horse, who just last week on Sunday at Aqueduct won the Gander Stakes against New York breds. And even though he was only beating a field of New York breds, a couple of those had run some decent speed figures on the way in, and Panda Gate himself got an 86 buyer, and he's a son of Aragona, who just based on pedigree and especially physicality just looks like a horse that's going to want every bit of added ground he can get. And as for Uncle Heavy, who was unfortunately just booted off the Derby Watch this week, he did nothing wrong. We had to make room for some others, and still waiting to see if his Withers holds up. It's a strong race, and he is likely to run in the Wood Memorial next, but doesn't feel like he's going to be that short of price in there. So he got just bumped off the list this week.
Panda Gate got an 86 winning the Gander. Uncle Heavy got an 84 winning the Withers. And Tapalo, based in California, got an 85. So 3 relatively evenly matched horses. Tapalo earned his 85, finishing second in the El Camino Real Derby at Golden Gate Fields. He's shipping to Turfway Park for the Jeff Ruby Stakes at the end of April. And the Jeff Ruby, last year's winner, Two Phils, finished a super second in the Derby. And a couple years ago, Rich Strike followed up his performance in the Jeff Ruby by upsetting the Kentucky Derby. So maybe Tapalo is kind of long shot, crazy horse for Kentucky Derby consideration. We'll find out more about him when he runs in the Jeff Ruby. Pandagate, Uncle Heavy, and Topolo, there's a look at their past performances, 86, 84, 85, their respective last start Beyer speed figures. That is a wrap for the Derby Watch preview. We have the Fountain of Youth on Saturday, a good allowance at Gulfstream on Friday, the Gotham, the San Felipe, the Battaglia, and we'll be back to talk about all of them next week on Derby Watch. For David Aragona, I'm Brad Free. Thanks for watching.